We are back with a special edition. Trey Deadwyler is back for the second time. You may have listened to him, episode 23. He likes to say he was the GOAT of the AmeriCorps Connections podcast. Yes, we're all doing the thing. You got your Jordans on?
Well, they also we're ready to go.
Yes. Oh, he had a little bit of pause there in your Wi-Fi, but we're gonna do good. We're going to do okay on this. Okay. So welcome to the AmeriCorps Connections podcast. We have Trey Deadwyler with us for the second time. We're going to be talking about a little bit something different. Yes, we're going to talk about his AmeriCorps service year, but just for a moment, because he has a special thing that is out in the world that we want to make sure everybody knows about. But if you're just new on this podcast, thank you for coming across AmeriCorps Connections. My name's Nicki Fiocco, and I'm an AmeriCorps alum. And this podcast is really based on having AmeriCorps alums come on the podcast. We reflect on their service term. We learn about the twists and the turns and the synchronicities that happen during and after a service year. One of the things I'm really interested in is what folks are up to now. And that's really like the meat of the podcast. Like, okay, you did a service year, you survived, you made friends, you did the thing. But what are you doing now? How did you take your service year and turn it into something amazing or something that, is sustaining the life that you want to live? So we're 1.3 million AmeriCorps alums strong, and I want to keep those connections going. When I served as an AmeriCorps member, the connections and the network that I have were the reasons why I was able to push my project across the line. And still now, post AmeriCorps, I still rely on those connections. So today I need to give a shout out to my folks real fast. So of course, shout out to Dan Medevere. If you're listening to this on Apple Tunes or Spotify or any of those things, Dan Medevere, NCCC, the first episodes I got, he was like, I'll put you on the platform and let's get you out there. Thank you so much, Dan Medevere, for Time or Money Productions. And earlier this year, the AmeriCorps Connections podcast is partnering now with the Do Good, Be Good team. Yep. Sharon
Shout out to Sharon.
Sharon Tewksbury Bloom and her all AmeriCorps alum staff are supporting this podcast on the back end by editing and some of the show notes and also the marketing. They're sending this out to their group and it's great. We're hoping to grow this podcast. We want to keep connecting alumni for purposes of almost like why we're here today with Trey. So Trey, I forgot what your service year was. When did you serve? Where did you serve?
I am an old head from 2004, I would say, NCCC Western Region, Class 11.
There we go.
Yeah.
So that's his AmeriCorps experience. But we're only here for a short period of time.
Yes.
Trey's been traveling for the last 3 weeks, so I want to respect his time and I want to get into your book. That is what I want to talk about today, right?
So crazy.
So the contemplative morning.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just frame this for everybody.
Okay.
In your life, in your work, you work with projects and people to push projects forward, to expand leadership, to be thoughtful leaders.
Mm-hmm.
How do you explain kind of what you're doing now and how this little book, it's a little gem. I love it. How this came about. So let's start with what you do now and then how you came across this inspiration.
Sure. So I guess my company, Think for Good, we basically focus on leadership development. I guess my kind of role within the organization is basically the director of leadership and culture development. And so you imagine one of the things I always say that basically leadership just can't be turned on. It has to be cultivated. And I think the root of all leadership is basically being really present. That's one of the key characteristics so that you can be much more aware. So a lot of our work is basically, we say now, is situated between one side of it being really present in that mindfulness standpoint to really pushing toward resilience and anti-fragile confidence. So everything in between that allows for a life to thrive is basically what we're coaching in, what we're training in, what we're facilitating conversations.
So you said,
yeah.
And what was that?
Oh, no, keep going.
I was going to say, you said that leadership is not what? It's cultivated?
It can't just be turned on. It has to be
leadership
cultivated.
Yes. Can't
Yeah,
just be
yeah,
turned on. It has to be cultivated. Speak a little bit
yeah,
more to that.
yeah. So everything is a particular pattern. Everything. So the way we converse, the way we connect, the way we actively listen or not, how we are listening when we're in a particular role, our leadership style. That leadership style is basically your pattern of behaviors. So when we talk about it, it's how we actually show up. It's the things that we do in those moments. So since everything is a pattern, a rhythm, a habit of some sort, then it's not necessarily that it just turns on. It's already within you. It just has to have an opportunity for or spark for that to actually show up in itself. So wherever you go, there you are. And that's what we try to make sure that where what before you get to where you're going, that you already have the skills, knowledge, abilities, attitudes, opinions, the habits, and so on, and the right patterns to actually execute properly.
So I understand that us humans, us mammal
Yeah.
humans, are creatures of
Hmm.
habit. So
Sure.
we don't want to give away all the spoilers of everything that you do, but what would be something that you would suggest to a leader that might have a blind spot? They might have a situation where they're just not able to see where they're holding themselves back with either a limiting belief or just a let's just not a limiting belief. Let's say a blind spot. Because you could say, I show up for people, I listen, I actively listen. Would you challenge somebody if they said, no, I'm an active listener? How would you challenge that person?
So one of the elements, of course, and the keys of mindfulness is basically attention and awareness. Not only awareness of when I talk about attention, it's awareness. I mean, it's attention. It's being attentive to what our body is doing, but also what we're thinking about at that particular motion. I mean, at that moment, what emotion we're feeling or experiencing at that moment, how we're processing, but also awareness of what on the second part of that is that awareness. So what lens are we using for this
Mm,
particular moment as well? And I think that's really important. And so I always push people to think about it this way. What we hope is that what I'm encoding, it's also what's being decoded.
mm,
So be okay with the inquiry. Because a lot of times how we sometimes perceive ourselves is not necessarily how it's being taken and received from others. And so I think that's necessary for us to kind of have those safe places, or no, run that back, have those brave opportunities
oh,
to
yeah.
actually connect with people that will give us honest answers. They give us, I would say, careful critiques as well as accurate affirmations as to how we show up. That helps us give a better view, because there's certain things where we think are deficits, what people find actually see to be really promising for us. And there's certain things that we think are really awesome about us. There's like, but to everyone else, we don't care for it. It doesn't work well here.
Yes.
And those are all habits a lot of times. Basically, again, how we show up and so on. So let's start off with being okay, finding those brave places so that you can do a reflection and an inquiry that people will give you good feedback. And I always say that feedback is the start of the conversation, not the end, but it's a way for us to kind of center ourselves on the map.
Yeah.
Okay.
I love all of that. The first thing that you said was being aware, right? Like we
Yeah.
cannot change anything if we don't put our attention to it.
Hmm.
And then I
Hmm.
think the second thing, and I love how you shifted that language, and I'm going to start doing that from now on instead of safe spaces to brave spaces. If you're in a leadership position, or even if you're just in whatever position, to seek out feedback. Like it can be like a massive ego blow where you think like, oh, I'm opening up all these doors and these opportunities for you. Isn't that what you want? And somebody's like, no, I just want to do my job. Like, could you just like stamp my timesheet and stop
Hmm.
trying to get me another job?
Hmm.
Like
Hmm.
I love the idea of really coming to whether it's your direct reports or whatever it might look like, but with kind of an open like, what do you need more of? What do you need less of? Like,
Yes.
what could I do less of for you?
That's good. So four good questions to ask. What do I need to do more of? What do I need to do less of? What do I need to be doing differently?
Mm,
And then number four is basically, what do I need to initiate right now? I think
love
those
that.
are great personal proclivity questions that we can start as we get awareness, especially once we are aware that you saw that blind spot. We call it that scotoma. Like when we start to that's that blind spot that
Uh,
we don't necessarily understand mentally, or can't see mentally. And all of us have them. Of course, I have them. You have them. Everyone that's
mm-hmm.
listening has one. And it's once we get through that, it's okay to get to where what my ideal state's going to be. Start asking yourself those 4 questions. You may not you may not like the less of or the more of, depending on where you are. Definitely,
Yeah.
probably you may not like what you like to do differently. And then the question is, what do you when you ask yourself what I need to do now and what I need to initiate today and in this moment, how much do you want it? How much do you want that change? Because then that'll, if
Mm.
you're able to move on it as soon as you answer that question, you probably have momentum, more momentum moving forward. So, yeah.
And I think so. Would you say that that's appropriate for even like if I, let's just say I was your direct report and we were having a check-in and you were like, how are your projects going, blah blah blah, could I finish the conversation and say, Trey, what is it that I could do less of or more than, and what can I initiate now? And then what was the other one? What do I
Um,
need to change?
more, less, differently, and initiate today.
Initiate now. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that would be appropriate for me to say to my direct report, like, help me out here. How can I make your life easier and better?
Indeed, but it works on both sides. So one of the things that when we're facilitating or training, one part of our reflection are those 4 questions. And so not only
Mm,
what can we be doing more of or less of from a facilitation standpoint, how to help the learning experience, but then how do you apply the learning? So based upon the
yeah.
learning that you receive, what can I be doing more? So it's a reflection part as well as providing feedback and to the other. And I think if both parties are doing that, then you have a good collaborative opportunity to talk about. Now you can move into like goal setting and some other pieces as well.
I
Yeah.
love that. And so that's a little peek into like what is it? Think for Good,
Hmm.
what your Think for Good organization could help
Yeah.
other leaders or their organizations do. And I love
Yeah.
that. Thank you so much for touching on that. It's such a good reminder to just be humble, show up and just realize like we don't have all the answers. And if we were reading all the books from the 80s and 90s, things are really different now. And we
Hmm.
don't have
Hmm.
to lean all the way to one side or the other to
Hmm.
manage. We can kind of find where it feels comfortable for us
Hmm.
and just empower people to like be themselves, like
Right.
show up, do
Yeah.
the work, and you don't have to be best friends with people at your job, but you're going to spend some time with each other. And people do better when they're in a nurturing environment, and not in a
Yep.
pansy way, but in like
Yeah.
a like I always like to say, like, like if you're working with me, you can fail flamboyantly, right? Like I learned that from yoga. If you're going to do something, like I'll never forget when I sent out an email from the constituent offices in Governor Hogan's office. It was to 10,000 people
Hmm.
and it was about a particular topic. And we just kind of blasted out this email. And I wanted to make sure that my director and my associate director knew that I sent this email out. So I BCC'd them. I had no idea that I was BCCing them on 10,000 emails. So for 2 weeks, they were deleting
Oof. Yeah.
inboxes. I just thought they were going to get like the initial like
Yeah.
email. Nope, 10,000 emails. And it started going into my inbox.
Yes.
And I ran into my ED's office. I'm like, don't look at your email. I will come into your office every morning from 6 to 8 a.m. and I will delete them all. I felt so bad. So, it's
That's
that
so
like,
good.
try something, you might
Yeah.
fail.
Yeah. For sure.
So tell
For sure.
me, let's just go into it.
Okay.
The com, contemplate, I can't even say the word, contemplative morning. We
Yes.
kind of talked about this off air, I think.
Yep.
You wrote something every day.
Yes.
And so this is inside of your brain.
Yes, a little bit.
This
A
is
little
like
bit.
baby Trey, like looking
Yes.
back on things, going,
For
this is
sure.
like now Trey. This is like future Trey talking to
Yeah.
yourself or other people.
Yeah.
So, what was the inspiration for this? And yeah, what was the process?
So I'll start off with the process. So in 16, we started really, I was transitioning. I was in a very interesting liminal space. I was, kind of working full time into Think for Good at that moment. And I hadn't realized that I had almost let go or let fall to the wayside my mindfulness practice. And
Mhm.
so really being centered, being really intentional. And I was, that's what happens a lot of times. Sometimes when we get a sense of peace about certain things, we just float on. But I had to remember, and I didn't put this in the book, but I remember one of my mentors used to tell me what got you there will keep you there.
Mm.
And then he said again, remember that what got you there will keep you there. So it's a two-part of that the things that we're doing will allow you to excel. But if we are not, if we pay, if, but it only lasts for a certain amount of time, because those same things that you're doing, if you're not growing with it, will also keep you right where you are. So coming back to it,
Love that.
um, I started in 16 and I just started to go through my mindfulness practice. And then something came to me, and most folks know that I keep a journal with me. I keep a journal with me all the time. And so I would just start writing. As soon as I came out of the meditation, I would do a reading, I would have my lemon water in the morning, and then I would sit. And then there would be words that came, and I would start to write. And those notes I start sending to my friends and my family, send them a text message in the morning, just saying, "Hey man, just wanted to let you know this. This is what came to me this morning during prayer time and my meditation." And then they start sending it to other people, and then they start sending it to other
Mm-hmm.
people, and it just kept growing. And I didn't necessarily realize that until people started to, "Hey, we want a different way of getting this." So I used a different app and brought everybody to the app, and everyone started signing up from there. But from 16, every weekday morning, I took a couple of breaks. I won't say every single weekday morning, because there were sometimes I was on vacation and I was like, whatever the ocean is going to tell me, that's all I'm going to do. And every weekday morning from there until 23, we basically sent out a message of encouragement, of something to think about and contemplate, and something that whatever that was on my mind. And just sometimes it was just basically, have you done your gratefuls this morning? Everything like that. So that's what you're seeing. And I think my friends used to tell me, Trey, I knew when you were in a cloudy space, because the contemplative morning for that week was me working through the promises that I believe, and
Mm.
or kind of like expressing, like people that knew me really well back then or over the few years knew that the contemplative morning is like, oh, he's pushing through something right
Yeah,
now.
he's in a space.
Yeah, definitely in a space. So that's what you're receiving in this book. And I hope that so 2,000 messages. Basically, we distill those down. I don't even know if we did that. We probably randomly selected more so than anything and pull those down to 40. And that's what's basically in the book. And we try to make sure that it was something that can be really helpful. Uh, the reason why it's also like pocket size is because you can take it with you. I have so many books over here that you have to, my book bag's already heavy enough. And yours
Right.
is probably is as well. So how many? I probably have 3 books, 3 journals, a
Yeah.
laptop, an iPad.
Yeah.
It's a lot of stuff. So this can basically fit in a back pocket if you would like, fit in a purse, a jump bag, whatever it may be. So that's why we have it small to start off with too.
Well, I love that. And it makes me think about Ryan Holiday, who wrote books on Stoicism.
Uh-huh.
And so he put out meditations
Yep. The
from
Daily Stoic.
From Marcus Aurelius.
Mm-hmm.
And it grew to like 1 million people. And then he's like, I'm going to turn this into a book. Right. And I actually have that book. Somebody gifted it to me. Thank you,
Mm-hmm.
Thomas Darnell, like
Mm-hmm.
listening
Mm-hmm.
to the stuff that I like. And so it makes me think about that. And, I told you before we started recording, and some of you, if you can see, I've got tabs in the book. And I realized that I was tabbing every page, and I had a reflection and a thought. And I just, as I went through it, because I also have a morning meditation, I think that as I'm doing this podcast, I'm connecting with people who I'm like, oh, yep, right there. We're doing the same stuff. We're feeling the same thing. The conversation's not about AmeriCorps, right? It's
Yes.
about like
Yes.
meditation and
Yeah.
spirituality and how do we get there? And
Right.
so that was something that I really wanted to bring into this podcast, because I think that during a service year we can lose our way in the way. And going back to what your mentor said is, what gets you there will keep you there. And I think that during a service year, sometimes we're just pushing through, and we got to think about like, why are we here? How did I
Mm-hmm.
get here?
Mm-hmm.
And so many of these contemplate, and I'm just pulling a random one here, and it just happens to be day
Oh,
two
okay.
already, day two.
Okay.
And it's today's insight. Our prayers to be more patient, to be more courageous, and to be more peaceful are also prayers for situations and conditions that allow us to be such. And that was so powerful. And it goes on for another thing. And it says, the gift has been granted, but how does one know their strengths until it's been tested? And my note to myself is, this is so good. We must be tested. How do we respond and show that we've learned the lesson? And that's like something that when I started my spiritual practice, that was the first lesson that I learned. That was the first thing that I learned, was that like, you're going to be tested, and then you're going to be given the skill, and then you're going to be tested again. And if
Yep.
you pass the test, you can move on, and you'll be
Yep.
tested and you'll get the skill.
Yep.
It's not like, oh,
Yep.
you're done. Yay.
Absolutely.
It's one thing
Absolutely.
after another. So I don't know.
Yeah.
That was something that came to my mind. Could you speak to that a little bit? Like,
Yeah, I think we are constantly we're constantly growing. Whether if we look at ourselves, I was thinking about lobsters, if you like lobsters, but anything that has to kind of kind of break out of its shell,
yes,
so it can grow. But that pressure until it moves, it has to break out of that in some particular way. So I thought about, I used to be a pretty heavy gym rat, and remembering the breaking down of the muscle, right? And how
one
much
more rep,
pain is, yeah, one
two
more
more
rep.
reps,
Yeah.
one more.
Yeah. And thinking about, oh, I don't, but once I was like, oh, I didn't know I could do another set. I didn't know that I could actually do 3 more reps until that's tested. And then so you go back in it, 2 days later, no problem. So I think it's about really knowing that you can continue to break through and move to a different threshold, traverse different thresholds to different
Mm-hmm.
levels, and you're constantly doing that. And so when we talk about patience, when we talk about courage, I think you need to experience levels of fear so that you can be more courageous, but you have to go through those. You have to challenge that. If you want to be patient, that means there's some things that are going to get pretty annoying in your life,
Yep.
so that you can really stay patient and really be steadfast in what you're seeing and so on. So I think that's the root of that, knowing, like you just said, asking for the gift, basically receiving the gift already from that
Yeah.
point, but then being tested to make sure that you understand that the gift is there.
Yeah. I mean, we all kind of want like, gratitude for patience. I want patience. Like, patience is my intention for this week. And we want that crown put on our head. And it's like, now I'm patient,
Mhm.
right? And then somebody's going to test you. I remember when I was working in constituent services, I did have a little thing that said, be patient,
Yes.
because I was tested every day.
Mhm.
I still don't know if I've learned that lesson. I think patience wasn't my lesson. I think it was just acceptance, where I'm like, this is where I am, this is where I am.
That's so good though. But so acceptance is probably number one when we talk about another element when we start thinking about being really more mindful, right? And accepting that it is,
Yes.
people are going to be who they are. It's
Yes.
only so much that I can control, except for what I can control, right? And
Yes.
and my response to how they are. People are doing the best that they can, or functioning at least, unless if people don't like the way I said that, functioning at least within the current state that they're in.
Yep. Yeah. No,
Right?
my partner and I, we say this all the time.
Yeah,
Everybody's doing the best they can with the resources that they have at this moment. That's it.
absolutely. Yep,
I mean, we can't
absolutely.
expect somebody to act differently if they're not mindful, right? Like, going back
Hmm.
to our conversation about a leader, if I'm not looking for my blind spots and
Hmm.
I'm acting like, I don't know, I was going to say an asshole, but let's just not go all the way to that end.
I get it.
Let's just
Yeah.
say I'm not listening, right?
Yep.
Or somebody's not listening as a leadership role, but I'm also not intentionally trying to grow that side of me, because maybe I'm going through something else in my life. Maybe my daughter's graduating from high
Hmm.
school and I'm like, okay,
Hmm.
yeah, I'm showing up for this job, but I'm trying to get my kid off to college,
Hmm.
whatever. And so the with the resources they have at that moment, I
Hmm.
think is super important to add
Absolutely.
to people are doing the best that they can.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I totally agree. And I think we just being mindful that, again, each one of us is living, leading, and experiencing life from the inside out. as I like to say all the time, not from the
Yes.
outside in, but from the inside out. So everyone is moving in their own journey and their own story, and we just intersect on a regular basis at different points on that journey, at different milestones that may not even seem like milestones, because some of those milestones are for you to be tested.
Yeah.
Some of those, and they can be getting tested for something different. But there's an opportunity for you all to grow with each other in that moment and leave a legacy with the person that you're interacting with too.
Yeah. And I will say, we're working from the inside out, but a lot of times we have to those of us that are actually working from the inside out, meaning
Mm-hmm.
we're like thinking about like, how am I going to show up today? Or maybe like I'm not showing up because I've got other stuff going on. But I would say there's more people that are acting from the outside in, and they're
Yeah.
responding
Yeah.
and reacting to what's going on in the outside rather than realizing that like
Mm-hmm.
that seems like a you and they problem and not a me problem, because
Mm-hmm.
I'm over here. I don't know.
You're
I don't know
right.
what you think
You're right.
about that, but
You're
I'm
no, I
very
think you're
much
right.
like,
I well, you're right, and I think those are what hold together pretty well, even though it may cause some distance for a few folks. But the idea is that a lot of times we will believe that the outside is actually telling us how we should experience life,
right.
and it's already predetermined. But the whole model of things of how we actually experience the world is situation, meaning and definition, then the emotion, then the thought, or the thought and the emotion, then the behavior. So a
Yes.
lot of times we forget that we put the meaning on things before we
Yes.
even experience the emotion.
100%.
And so
I
we
just said
can
that
get
to
people to understand that we can shift that.
I just said
Yeah,
that to
well, I'm
somebody
saying
the
we
other
can
day.
even shift. That's
You
it.
go.
That's it. And once we get them to that place, oh no, we're good. We're good. No, so we can get people to shift in that mode of like, oh, how am I seeing this? Because that's also telling me how if I'm seeing a particular way, that's the meaning I'm placing on it, then that for some reason we believe that's the fault, the emotion for it. Not necessarily, because everyone again can you some it can be difficult to train your mind to experience certain things differently. But we've all kind of experienced that before. Certain events, oh, we're just not, it just they don't do it anymore because the meaning of it is different in our head. Me being thrown in a pool many years ago because Pop was like, hey, you got to learn how to swim. That's not the same as me jumping in the pool now. I don't have the same
Yes.
meaning to someone throwing me in the pool and so on. I used to tell this story about birthday parties. If you love birthday parties and someone else gets invited to my birthday party and hates birthday party, it's the same thing. It's the same experience, right? But the meaning of it and how basically determine their emotions around it and their thoughts around it. Trey didn't care about me. You would love it, right? Trey doesn't care about why did he bring me to this place? He know I don't like people in, you know, right? And then the thought, his emotion comes about, then start ruminating in that space, and then he has a totally different behavior. Meanwhile, your thought and emotion experience is different because of your meaning that you've placed on it, and you will have a totally different behavior and experience. So it's so crazy. And it's actually what I would say. It's so unfortunate that people don't know
Yes.
that model of how they're thinking, because as soon as you catch it, you catch the pattern of how you've actually been moving, and then
Yep.
you realize if you can catch the pattern, you can change the pattern.
You can catch the pattern, you can change your pattern, and
Yep.
you can stop judging other people
Oh
for
yes.
them being stuck in their pattern, because you realize that like Trey doesn't like birthday parties. That's why he doesn't come to birthday parties or he doesn't talk to me. Like
Mhm.
that has nothing to do with me. He's just working through something. I don't need to take it personally.
Yeah.
Right? Like
Yep.
so huge. We
And
just
I don't.
solved the world's problems.
We did because here's the thing. One of the things I talk about a lot of times. I don't necessarily need you to believe what I believe for me to believe it.
Hmm.
I don't necessarily. So and that's where the acceptance comes into play as well. Until it starts to move into like my own self sovereignty and my freedom and my agency and all those
Right.
things.
Right.
But one of the challenges is to get people. I'll tell you sometimes when we talk about, because they understand and we talk through the ego and how do you communicate in a particular way. A lot of folks will ask somewhere in the trainings and the facilitation of how can I get this person to, and I'm like, I'm not training them.
No. Nope.
They're not here.
Yep.
I'm showing you, I'm giving you resources, I'm giving you the information of how you can actually manage yourself and
Yep.
lead yourself. And I still do say though that leadership is still is very contagious. So, but I can't tell you how to. Well, I could, but I would rather not teach you how to manipulate people. I would rather get you to understand how to manipulate yourself, your mood, your states, so that you can be very accepting, being very attentive, and that you can be very aware of where you need to be at that moment.
And that's where you can kind of be reflective as a leader. What am I
Yeah.
going to do if you're working with somebody or you whatever, and you know somebody reacts in a certain way, then you practice. What am I going to do when I know this person is going to come to me and say or do this? How am I going to
Mhm,
respond? Right? Not like, how am
mhm,
I going to respond to humiliate them or whatever? It's like, how am I going to respond to understand more or be more
mhm,
curious? And we don't have to
mhm,
be like soft and accepting of all of people's actions in let's just say the workplace, but we can show up and we can challenge ourselves to
mhm.
be better communicators. Like, oh, how can I communicate this idea to that person? Not necessarily to change their mind, but just to challenge myself on using new words. Like, if you know that
Mhm.
like the conversation is not going to go anywhere, then just practice a new skill on that person, like whatever it might
Yeah.
be. I mean, that I don't know, maybe that's a wrong thing, but I'm down
Well,
with that. Like, if I can't move the needle on people, I'm like,
yeah.
all right, then what I'm going to try to do is use this one word in the conversation I have with you 4 times because I want to put this word in my vocabulary.
Yeah. I think I was trying to like level set in our work. I am not uh a miracle worker, even though some of the stuff that we do is really cool of how we can shift behaviors. Change readiness,
Mm,
it's a thing.
yeah,
And the desire for change has to be higher than their desire to be where they are and be in the
yeah,
comfort that they're already in. And so many folks, especially as we become adults and we really in kind of we believe we believe that we are really set in our ways and set in ourselves. Typically that's just an ego talking because it just gives us that little frame of how we see ourselves. That can create a little bit of challenge for folks. And so I
yeah.
wanted to go somewhere, but I'll pause
I
because I
was just
could.
going to say, I think there's a quote, I don't know where it's from, but change happens when staying where you are is more painful. I think that might even have been in
Yes.
your book, right? Like I just can't be here any longer. I can't do
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
And you're just like, not going to do it. I'll share a really funny story about how I changed. So it's really fast. So I started smoking cigarettes when I was like 19, 18, 19. And
Hmm.
my friend and I, we worked together. So we would go out in the parking lot and we'd smoke. And then I moved to Virginia and I lived with my in-laws out in Virginia, and I grew up in California and it was winter and they didn't smoke. I had to go outside and smoke. And it was like the middle of winter and it was
I
like
remember.
1995. So I think there was like a
That's a
blizzard
blizzard.
and
That's
yeah,
a
and I'm
blizzard on the East
standing
Coast.
outside going,
Yeah.
I'm driving with the windows down smoking. And
Yeah.
finally I was like,
Mm-mm.
no, I don't, I
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
freeze.
Yeah.
And it was like, just like that. It was just a decision. I woke up and I'm like, I'm not going to do this anymore. Standing outside, getting frostbite on my fingers and toes is not worth
Hmm.
me smoking cigarettes.
Hmm.
And I know that like smoking, there's a whole thing with addiction and stuff like that.
True.
But I mean, I had consistently done it, but there was just a shift in my mind where I'm like, this is just too painful. I'm not going to do this anymore. And we're moving on with it.
There still has to be a decision, then and then then maybe even some necessary supports. But you were saying but what you're saying there is you made a decision. I always talk about how the root of decision is also means to cut something
Yes.
for everybody to remember that when you're making a decision, you're saying yes to something or you're saying no to something. Everything you
Yes.
say yes to, you're saying yes to, but you're also saying no to other things, and the vice versa. And so going back to that change readiness piece is sometimes it's like, okay, there maybe not. I'm what I would love for our audience to know is sometimes, so thinking about us as servant leaders. right? We
Mm-hmm.
have, most of us have pretty big hearts, so much so that we have to be very careful of enmeshment with
Mm-hmm.
others, not
Yep.
empathy, but even in a place where we are experiencing everything, and we start to
Yeah.
take ownership of their own movement and the things that they should be responsible for as human beings, to a place where now it's getting pulled from us. And you can move, if you start to notice how you're trying to care and you're trying to move people, and we don't have the proper strategy, you can get yourself burnt out. But
Yes.
their change readiness matters. A lot of times what we're doing is just sowing seeds. We're really just trying to plug the yeah, we're just trying to really plug the or like, fill in the blanks here and there, give them the resources that's necessary. But sometimes that may take 3 years down the line.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, most of our programs, when we start thinking about how we're doing the work, what we're doing in elementary school is to help them learn reading and writing and math at this moment, so they can actually graduate high school at a
Yes.
later time, when we probably will not be around at that moment. Right. And
Right.
so we have to keep in mind that the work that we're doing and how we're supporting people, a lot of times it's just for this moment. And since I always say that we leave a legacy with every person that we encounter at every encounter, we don't know what's going to happen from there, but we need to make sure that we're intentional about what we leave. And
Yeah.
that's basically all that we can do.
It's the quote of, they're not going to remember what you said, but they're going to remember how you made them feel. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I want to go to your book. I want to go to
Okay.
the just the table of content, and
Yeah.
it's broken up by intentionality,
Hmm.
courage, which you made
Yes.
that distinction, service, resilience, and love.
Yes.
Why those topics?
Um, we were trying to theme it out a little bit, and there were so many things that we could have focused on. There's some ways that we could have focused on the business side of things, and or like the entrepreneurial journey. And I just realized that when we start to look at the elements and the essential qualities of life, first off, being really intentional is important.
Yeah.
Um, and really, again, being more mindful and being intentional with our thoughts, our words, our emotions, how we respond to certain things. I wanted to start there. So you may even notice that like the largest section is intentionality and courage.
Yes.
I think courage is necessary because, as my Dr. Maya Angelou talks about, you can't practice any other virtue without courage at the root of it. Right?
Mm.
You have to be able to practice courage. So I wanted to move into that place. So for you to be intentional, here's the other thing. Anytime you set an intention, you should be prepared for disruption. You should be prepared for distraction. You should be prepared for something to kind of get in your way. And I think that is odd to say. I'm sorry. This is not like, I'm
No,
sorry.
I
But
mean,
people,
if you think about it, anybody that's gone out to make a change in this world, people have
mm-hmm.
been like, "What are you doing?" Right? It's like,
Right.
nope. This is my goal. This is what I'm
Yeah.
trying to do. No, you're never going to get this done. Nobody's going to see it that way. Well, you know what? I'm going to
Yeah.
start taking one step at a time, one foot in front of the other, because that is
Yeah.
what my heart's telling me.
Yep. Disruptors, distractions, detractors are going to basically come in your plate, come in your face at some particular point. You're going to encounter them anytime you set an intention. But we want you to, but that's also, like we said it on day two, about that's how you know the intention is that you're moving probably in the right direction. You have to be
Yes.
tested with the intention that you really want. Once you make it through that, we can keep you pick up some momentum. So that's where the courage comes back into play. We talk about service in that space because I just believe service is if you notice, it's in the middle. It is the fulcrum of, I think, of everything. The ability to give of yourself. And I think the open hand of the giver, it's also open to receive. And
Mm-hmm.
so we keep that in mind. So that's strategically and also spiritually in my book of why it's actually in the middle. It's centers between everything. and it's the connection to getting us to a place of resilience. The resilience is basically just telling us that once you've moved through that place and you're serving well, you're being intentional, you're moving with courage, right? You're moving it as a giver. You're serving your particular purpose. You're serving others in that moment. You're serving yourself. You're serving your family. You're serving society. You're providing that contribution. They're still going to, well, you still need the tools to actually allow you to finish the race.
Mm.
And so I gave a few quotes in that section about that section is really about finishing the race. How do you endure? I just realized I have my endure shirt on
Yay.
today. But how do you endure? To move to what you set your intention for, and then ultimately we want to get to a place of love, and that's the love of self, love of, I would say, self, then family, then neighbor, then family, then neighbor, then neighborhood, and then it just continues to move from there. And so those morning messages and daily insights are about how do you center yourself around love, how do you center yourself as a loving individual, and then move forward from there. And so that's kind of how it flows.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And it makes so much sense. And I love that service is in the middle. We came together, and this whole podcast is about
Hmm.
folks that have done service in
Yeah.
AmeriCorps, and we're AmeriCorps alums, and we've done service.
Hmm.
And there's proof. It shows that, like, if you do service, if you volunteer, it changes your brain. And actually the volunteer sometimes gets more out of it than the person that you're
Hmm.
serving or
True,
whatever.
true.
And so I love that you said that that's kind of the center where you're like, okay, I've done all the things and now I'm going to serve. The one thing I want to chat with you about a little bit. I know we're running out of time, but the word love.
Hmm.
So I listen to so many different, like, esoteric podcasts and just
Hmm.
things about the universe and consciousness and everything. And people throw around this word love.
Hmm.
And I've what I've heard is that it's really gotten diluted.
Hmm.
And sometimes it can be this combative, almost like yucky word to
Mm.
people. Like, what is love? I've never been loved. Like, I don't celebrate Valentine's Day. It's a Hallmark day. So
Yeah.
you kind of talked about it a little bit, but when you think about love, what is that? What could, like, I almost think about, like, is it a color? Like, is it a feeling? Like, we
So
don't
there's a
have to
lot.
say,
Sure.
like, we love you. It's
Yeah.
something.
So it is a so the way I so there's it depends on where we want to go with this, because could be really what we try not to do. As you know, we don't want to go down the rabbit hole because we know we could do that and we could get really deep, and it's like, where are they going? All right,
Yeah.
so here are my quick thoughts. One, when I think about love, there's a way of looking at it from a brotherly love, a friendship, deep care and concern for the
Mm,
other, where I am because you are, and you see a reflection. That's where respect
yeah.
comes from as well. So I get to, I don't want any harm for you. You don't want any harm from me. I am actually a part of who you are. I'm a space of really unconditional. Now, I am in the space that I don't believe that I can perform as a human with the spirit, basically moving in a space where it's completely unconditional. I think that's for
Really good point.
someone beyond me, and that's just my personal belief in that space. But that's the idea of basically that's the unconditional side of things. So as you move, you are still cherished, you're still loved, and so on. I'm getting there, hopefully, and I'm still in a space where I think I can accept many things, and that's really I can accept many things without necessarily agreeing with everything.
Mm, mm, mm. I love that distinction. So that distinction falls under unconditional love.
Hmm. Yeah.
So
So
I
that
just we're not going down a rabbit hole, but I just want to just flush something out here because
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think it's
yeah,
helpful. I think it's a
yeah.
helpful idea.
Sure.
So when I think of unconditional love, I think about being a doormat. I
Mm.
think about, like, I unconditionally love you and you take everything from me, but I love you. I'm the giving tree.
Yeah,
I'm just going to
yeah,
die here.
yeah,
But I
yeah.
love what you said, because that, for me, that gives me a beacon. So if I'm striving for unconditional love, and that beacon is to, what did you say? Appreciate.
So acceptance and then agreement. Yeah.
Yes. So like accept what you say, maybe not agree with it, but I accept it.
Mm-hmm.
So if
And
I'm going to say it one more time so I remember. So if I'm trying to feel unconditional love and the beacon is I accept what you say, but I don't necessarily agree with it. That feels good. That feels green. That feels aqua green to me.
yeah,
Yes.
and it
And
will
it almost
remove.
feels like throat chakra, right? Because it's
Yes.
kind of like,
Yeah.
okay,
Well, the word,
okay.
because the word matters here as well. Because sometimes when we talk about acceptance, what we actually hear is agreement. Sure,
Yeah.
I accept that.
Yes.
No, no, no. But
Mm-mm.
acceptance and agreements are actually two different words, but we've combined them, we've conflated them, and that's what we're seeing. So when I talk about acceptance, we're talking about establish that it is. And so that's before we put the filter of yes, no, green, red, love, don't love, great for me, not great for me, or what have
Yeah.
you. And so the agreement is basically comes in after that, and that's based upon what we value. And
Mm.
so I may accept that that's that what it is, but I don't necessarily say that that actually still agrees with my particular value pattern and my value set of beliefs. And I think that's really important, and that can really
Yeah.
get you into it can get you a totally different point. Now,
Yeah.
because which also means, and from my standpoint, that I can also disagree, right? Still accept, but I can, and it gives me the power to be able to disagree. And I think, hey, I get it. And again, always say until it starts moving into my own self sovereignty, to
Yes.
starts to move into my place of being able to be a free human being, then no challenge on that side. But you talked about, so that's a part of love, and then of course we have romantic
Mm.
love, the where the level of intimacy is it's deeper. And where it's a connection, it is hopefully a loving marriage. For some people it's a loving partnership, for some people it is a covenant for some folks, and I think that's a different place. So but there's, I think a lot of times when I talk about love, the start of it for me, it's always, do I see the other person, do I see myself in the other person, do they see
Mm.
themselves in me? This is why we say namaste,
Mm.
right? It is reflecting here.
I see the light in you.
I see the light in you and the divine in you. You see the divine in me.
Yeah.
And I think that's where that comes into play. I also think this probably it probably would have been a different podcast, but I will lift this up. I think this is important
Let's do it.
to think about how we see the other person. And I always say that how we see ourselves is basically usually telling us how we see others. So a lot of times I would ask, how would you, what descriptive words would we use to describe? I start asking people all the time, what descriptive words would you use to describe yourself? If you were talking, if you had to give a quick bio, what would you start off with? You don't have to answer, but one of the things I kept noticing is that so many people, I've had two and probably a few hundred conversations, don't start with human first. They will start with the position that they're in.
The jobs. Yeah.
They will start with the sex or gender. They will start with their race. They will start somewhere else except from being human first. And I
Wow.
think so the lens that they see themselves, the start
Yes.
is the main lens. The first thing they think about, first
Yeah.
couple of things are their main points of view. So
Ooh.
that's the view they see everyone else. So I see you from here, right? So that means, and that has all the value judgments, all the other, everything
Yeah.
that you may think, and attribution errors, the biases, the beliefs, are all centered around that pair of glasses that we use. And I said, what would happen if we saw people as human first before we saw the ego traps and the small ego boxes that
So
we kind of
good.
use? That can be, I'll just say it, that could be hella powerful for so
Yes.
many, because if I see you as human first,
Yes.
that starts everything. So because
Yes.
if you lift that up, how do we actually, if you look at every atrocity, it starts with
De
dehumanization.
dehumanization. Yep. There
Every
she.
single thing, it
Yep.
starts with dehumanization. So if we lift up the view of people to start getting us to see us as human first, instead of all these other little small distinctive boxes, some of them we just made up.
Right.
Just to kind of make sure that we feel comfortable and so on. But what we do know
So we're
is
humans.
that you're human first. So we move from there, and I think that is so I'm writing a whole bunch of stuff on that too right now. We'll get into that probably later on when we have our next chat.
Love
But
it.
that right there is where I think the love really starts to kick in. I see you as human first, right? I can now I don't, if I'm seeing myself as human, you see yourself as human, then there's a level of value that we automatically place upon each other, right? Again, I have to see myself as human
Hmm.
with inherent value, and then you have to be able to see that from yourself, for yourself as well. Then there's a way that is, I believe, there's an automatic and very and tacit manner in which of understandings and how we actually interact with each other.
I think that that would change the world. I
I
mean,
hope so. Yeah.
if we started with like, so Nikki, like, what do you do? Well, first of all, I human be.
Hmm.
I'm a human being.
Hmm.
I'm being.
Hmm.
And, whatever. I connect with people and do whatever, do other
Yeah.
things. It's true. It's the humanity and so many of the things that I've listened to is actually once we start to especially with the AI that's coming out, and I love it. I mean, some of it I'm like, whoa, that's pretty crazy. I love being able to drop reports in and be like, make this into a social media post, like
Right.
that's
Right.
cool. And
Yeah.
drop in some cool emojis and let's put little hashtags in there.
Sure.
But one of the things that they're talking about is that like something that, on the other side of this AI combustion is that like we're going to really appreciate things that come from humans and that come from the human heart and the human mind. And for me, for some reason things like resonate in color, and it's more of like that red orange sort of peachy color that is like,
Hmm.
you can tell a difference between something that's a little bit more silicone gray and, cold and white. You know, love all the Macs, love them all. But I love that that's human first. And I feel like we could talk forever and ever. So I want to just wrap us up with
Sure.
a couple questions real fast. What do you want people to take away from the contemplative morning? Well, let me ask a different question. How do
Okay.
you want folks to use? What would you like folks to? How would? Let me see if I can ask a question. How would you like folks to use the contemplative morning? How would you like them to use it?
So it's 40 days, and I would like for you folks to actually take it one day at a time and really take some moment. If you notice, so in the book,
Yep.
there's a daily insight for the day. And you may notice, like I tried to also open it up. So for those that may be more visual thinkers, there's a small story or some sort of illustration of basically what I mean to give you, for those that really like the esoteric symbolic language. I try to give a little bit of that. And then there are some questions to ask. I think inquiry is really powerful for everything. And then some practices. So take it on that taking on just that task for that day is really where I would like folks to start. Try not to rush through it and just enjoy the journey and see as you are moving, start to jot down your progress or some
Mm-hmm.
thoughts that go through those inquiries, make sure that you journal. And then like somewhere halfway at day 20, look back at day one and see if there's any, and look back at the last couple of days and see those last few days and see if there's anything that's shifted or there's anything
Mm,
that is trending as you move through the
yes.
process. And then, so every morning, if you could start it off, get your cup of Joe. I would always say after you read the contemplative morning message, just sit for a moment, try to either repeat it or just see what comes to you. If you mind, here's the quick tip. I always talk about sometimes your mind is racing so much. This is one thing I've taught some folks before. Ask it what it's thinking.
Oh, yeah.
If you ask your mind what is it
Yeah.
thinking, it's like it's in a, what do you call it, the spotlight, and it has
Yeah.
no idea what to do.
It's like,
So
it's
it's
like
like
what?
I don't know, you tell me.
Me?
It's like looking at you. The mind is trying to figure out, I don't know, what are we thinking? Somebody tell us. And so to capture like running away, what are you thinking right now? And just think, and you'll notice your mind will start to clear because it's trying to source, but it also is catching, so now you're able to see what you're actually able to help your mind pause a little bit. coming back to that. So after you do that, maybe I would say answer the questions in your journal to start. Some of those questions you may not be able to answer that in the morning, and maybe happening toward the end of the day, and then just
Hmm.
reflect and see what comes about. Go through those 40 days. Send me a note if something is challenging you, if you're excited about something, or you had a revelation. I love hearing those notes, seeing that the book has a particular impact. I would love for you to do the same. So that would be great.
Where should they send the notes? I'll put them in the show notes, but where should they send the
So
notes?
you can always find me on social media. So you can connect with me at Trade Deadwyler on social media, or at Contemplative Morning on social media, or Think for Good. You can actually hit the company up and just,
Okay.
hey, we're reading the Contemplative Morning, and this is what we're experiencing right now. I would love that feedback.
Love that.
Yeah.
Definitely will. We'll do that. And it's always kind of, if people are just new into this work, obviously you and I have been doing this for a bit, but recognizing that there's something that's listening can be a little bit like,
Oh, yes, yes,
what?
yes, 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 yes.
So like, how does somebody deal with that when you're like, I mean, asking that question, I love it. I'm totally going to do it tomorrow morning. What are you thinking? And I know that my girl ego, she lives right here. And
Okay.
so she'll be like, well, I'll tell you what I'm thinking. You know what I mean? Not you. I mean, the other one.
Yeah, yeah. I
But
think
sometimes
that
it can be a little weird, right? Like I remember when I first started like spirituality and it was like, who's listening? And I'm like, no, who's listening?
hmm Well, it's I think to be able to realize that you can observe your thoughts,
Yes.
that could blow your mind as well. Like, wait a minute, I can observe myself thinking.
Yeah.
Yes. So how's that possible? We can't get into this on this podcast,
Not
but
on this right now. Yeah.
but that's you're able to observe yourself thinking. How is that
Hmm.
possible? But it's a great way to start, and just being able to realize, oh, I can probably pause that. I can actually get that to move in the direction I would like. And also realize that it's just doing what it wants up there.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, 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 no. You are mine. You are my mind. You don't necessarily let me run the show here. Let me at least drive the car instead of you driving the car all the time. And so let me be a little
Yes.
bit more intentional of how we want to move, or at least let me align with where we really make sure that you are aligned with where I believe I really want to go as well.
Yeah. a hundred
So
percent. And
yeah.
I've always heard it's like training an animal. Sit. I'm in charge.
Yes,
Stay.
yes, yes. Oh,
Yeah.
it's trying to keep itself safe too. It's like, wait a minute, if you keep
Yes.
doing this, I gotta resist, and
Yes.
so that's a totally different conversation. Like, wait
Yes.
a minute, the ego is resisting. Yes,
Oh
it,
yeah.
it wants to survive as much as it can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the contemplative morning, if you haven't gotten it yet, best places that are helpful for you to get it.
So you can on all our social media, of course, you can reach us at thinkforgood.org, the contemplativemorning.com, I'm sorry, contemplativemorning.com as well. The bit.ly contemplative morning is easy because it's a quick page, it's even faster. I just found out looks like Amazon has picked it up. It's at Target right now, it's at walmart.com as well.
Nice.
And here's the thing, if you go to your local bookstore and they do not have it, tell them, hey, we want the contemplative morning. See if they can order a copy, and then call me, and then or then reach out to me, and we'll get it to you faster. We
So
want to make sure that basically, it's in all of our big box stores. We want to make sure that it's in all of as many hands as possible. So, thank you all to those big distributors that have taken up the book.
no,
Again, we did not know, and they have now selling the book for us as well. So,
love that.
yeah,
And honestly, like if you're in an AmeriCorps service project or program and you've got some funds, get these in your AmeriCorps members' hands, get
yes,
them in your staff's hands, like have a conversation about these things. These things will change your life. Like
yeah,
they will change your life. So I
yeah.
could go on forever and ever. So we'll have to connect again. I think every 6 months, the universe is like, okay, we can bring them together now.
Right.
I just
That's
want to
fine.
congratulate you because I
Thanks.
I'm working on a little project that we can talk about afterwards.
Okay.
And it is a thing, right? It's a thing, it's a process. And so, congratulations on getting on the other side of that. The
Thank you.
baby has been born and she's
Yes.
out and she's learning and she's making an impact. So, any last words or anything that you want to close with?
Remember that we leave a legacy with every person that we encounter at every encounter. I've said that. And I think this is just a part of the legacy. I try to do my best to give folks something to hold on to motivate them, to move them into that place of resilience and love, for them to be more intentional, to serve fervently, to live courageously. And I really do hope just this short book of 40 days can really help to build and really gives that. So thank you so much for everyone that's going to purchase and that has purchased. Thank you, Nicki, for allowing me to be back. And yeah, like I said, another 6 months, and then we're gonna be back. See what
Yes.
happens. No, just kidding.
Trey
But thank you so
Deadwyler,
much.
that was amazing. Thank you so much. And
Thank
for
you.
everybody, we'll be back with another AmeriCorps Connections, connecting with an AmeriCorps alum.
Yeah.
And hang in there, follow, like, and do all the things.
Go
Take
at
care.
Triple C.
That too. Bye.